I did this for several weeks and was going out of my head with boredom. And I spoke to the guy who ran the sort of database side of things, and I had taken a lot of physics courses and math courses, and I had pretty good quantitative background as an undergraduate, and I'd taken computer science courses. I knew how to program, and I said, let me try this stuff. And he came to me a couple of days later with a stack of manuals and a set of specifications for a program he needed, and he said, I need this by tomorrow. And I was there all night, and by the time he came in the next day, I cobbled together something that kind of worked.
Right.
And that's sort of how I got into it on a professional basis. I started building these massive databases and doing statistical analyses. And then we started doing financial applications, and then from there I came back to New York after not too long and went to work for a company that did banking software and designing and developing software for trading rooms and for back offices. And from there I went to work for JP Morgan for a long period of time. And then I went into partnership with several other folks, and we had a company that designed and developed a product that was really covered everything from the execution of a trade all the way to the back end of moving the money around and doing the accounting and all that stuff. And we had some good success.
I thought that you must have a pretty solid background in it, since your character, John March, comes from a merchant banking family.
Yes, he does.
Which is a pretty endangered species. Are there really many left?
I conceived of Klein and Sons as, if Lehman Brothers had stayed a partnership. That's kind of how I conceived of the March family firm. But there really aren't many left at all. I don't know that Lehman might have been the last one.
There's a guy named John Malcolm. I don't know if you've run across his books. A British writer. Well,
no.
Then I'm going to introduce you to him, because his guy, Tim Simpson, works for a merchant bank in London called White's Bank, which, if you sort of trace it back, goes back. Now, I've never known. Do you know whether it's pronounced Coots or Cotts? C-O-U-T-T-S.
I think it's pronounced Coots.
Okay, because they were a major private banker in the 19th century, and in fact bankrolled Edward VII when he was the Prince of Wales and had that wild lifestyle, and his mother kept him on a tight rein and whatever. And I think it was his daughter, Edwina, that married Lord Mountbatten, and she was thus wife to the last Viceroy of India and had the affair with Nehru while her husband was separating India and Britain. And the British are so good at all this kind of stuff. But there was really heavy money. But if you go back to the front end of the 19th century, there were private banks in England. You must know David Liss.
Yes, I know David well.
Right, because David wrote about the rise of sort of money and stock shares and the South Sea bubble and all that stuff in, what was it, like the 1720s? The South Sea bubble burst in 1723 or whatever it was. So you had about 200 years in England where there was serious private banking, and similarly in America, wasn't Gouverneur Morris I think he was a banker.
Yeah, and definitely, New York from its earliest days. I mean, part and parcel of New York from the days of the Dutch, was finance and banking, and that was going on from its earliest days. To me, the sort of the world of money is an absolutely fascinating one, and in part because there's always so much at stake. I remember the first time I walked onto a trading floor and saw just this vast array of people and this incredible activity. And it struck me immediately that this was an incredibly noirish place, because you had people under extreme pressure. You had some, big personalities, often kind of dysfunctional personalities, in a highly competitive situation, and tremendous pressure. And of course, money was, as the cliche goes, it was just the way of keeping score, because clearly there was a lot more at stake for these people. There was, there was an existential thing going on. There was the sense of self was kind of on the line. And when you see some of the, craziness that people go through, and you see the kind of, sweaty paranoia, or the raw greed that's displayed, or the this incredible sense of entitlement. It's just it's a great place for an aspiring novelist to hang out.
Well, there's a huge amount of social context too. I mean, certainly money was a passport, if you were in England anyway, to cracking the upper classes to the degree that they could.
Absolutely, and in this country, it's all it takes is some money to reinvent yourself any number of times.
The other thing, though, that I think you really pick up from reading David Liss and tracing it up to this till sometime in the 20th century, although there's still huge risk, as we all know from right here with the Lincoln Savings and Loan disaster and Mr. Keating, is that when you had all these private bankers, family firms and all, you had tremendous risk for them, but also for their investors, because there was no insurance or protection schemes. We all thought that, in fact, the federal insurance would protect the savings and loans and all, but didn't work out that way.
Well, and in the current day and age, you see a lot of concerns expressed about hedge funds and the rise of hedge funds, and the hedge fund activity accounts for a huge percentage of activity on the stock exchange these days, and of course they are by and large unregulated. With every article that's written about the zillions of dollars some hedge fund manager has raked in fees, another few hundred hedge funds open up, and who's running these things, and how do you know who these people are and what kind of track record they have? So it's a sort of a Wild West thing going on.
Well, yeah, no, I can see that it really is. And now, you sort of switch from actual piracy after Spanish bullion to internet hackers, moving huge sums of money around. And actually, it isn't even money. It's just
electrons.
Right, it is. But I think for the crime novelist, obviously, this is a huge and interesting arena.
Oh, it's great. It's great. I think if you're a financial thriller writer, it's a whole new set of mechanics that you can kind of celebrate, and that is always fun. For me, I am always much more interested in the characters and the personalities of who these people are and the kind of the world that they live in, and what sort of sense of entitlement is following them around, and to me it's just fascinating.
So you've got John March, who comes from the March merchant banker family, still successful in New York, still lots of money, social position, and he's a complete renegade. What drove him forth to be a lawman in Upper New York State?
Yeah, he walked away from the family banking business, and I haven't fully told that part of his backstory.
Okay.
Although I will.
Of course you will.
I will someday. But parts of it come out in each of these books, and actually, Red Cat tells you a lot more about March's family background and sort of the family dynamic and how dysfunctional it was. But yes, March, after a brief and unsuccessful stint in trying to be a dutiful son, realized it wasn't going to take, and he ended up married and upstate in New York as a sheriff's investigator. Then all manner of bad things happened to him and happened to his wife. At the end of which time March was widowed, and he sort of went off the deep end for a while. And when we meet him in Black Maps, when we meet him for the first time, he's recovered from all of that, and he's sort of pieced his life together. But he's made his life very small, and to him very manageable. But at the same time, it's also tremendously isolated. He really leads a very solitary, almost ascetic life, and that's kind of the most that he can manage. And it's a lot easier for March to delve into other people's lives and other people's problems than it is really for him to come to terms with some of his own.
And so you managed to do that with these first two books, but in Red Cat, in fact, it's his own brother who's under threat, so he's pushed back into the family.
Absolutely, and that was actually one of the things I enjoyed most about writing Red Cat, and one of the reasons why I'm so excited about it. It is definitely the most personal story I've told about March so far, very personal to him. And it's besides the kind of twisty whodunit, it is very much a story about family relationships.